My, it's my pleasure to welcome my dear friend and well-wisher, Professor Lieutenant E. Kalpana from Triple V College, Virudhunagar. So today she'll be talking to us about the American scholar, and she's a versatile reader, thinker, and also a person with an open-minded heart towards social justice and peace. So welcome, Professor. So now we'll have one of our students to introduce you to the group.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jaini Sachinta, fourth year student from Department of Languages and Communication Studies, Faculty of Communication and Business Studies, Trincomalee Campus, Eastern University, Sri Lanka. I am very happy to welcome all for today's webinar based on the American scholar and Emersonian Dynamicity. Before beginning this session, I take this as an opportunity to extend my sincere thanks to Dr. Rohan Savarimuthu, Senior Lecturer, Department of Language and Communication Studies, Faculty of Communication and Business Studies, Trincomalee Campus, for giving us this great opportunity. Now, I invite Chamali to welcome our honored guest, Professor Lieutenant E. Kalpana. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaini. Welcome to the webinar on the American Scholar and Emersonian Dynamicity. I am honored to extend a warm welcome to our guest today, Assistant Professor of English and Associate NCC Officer, Lieutenant E. Kalpana from Department of English. She renowned for her expertise in detective writings, American literature, and elite writings. She has completed a Masters in English and Masters of Philosophy from Madurai Kamaraj University. Not only that, she has published many articles, papers, and also she has awarded Veera Marayanam Award for NCC year 2023. Therefore, we are proudly honored to have your esteemed presence with us today, madam. Today we have gathered here for the webinar arranged for the fourth year students of BA in Languages at Trincomalee Campus, Eastern University, Sri Lanka. I'm sure that this webinar will provide us with valuable insights and greatly enhance our knowledge. Once again, I warmly welcome all of you for this webinar. During this session, don't hesitate to seek clarification on any doubts regarding this topic and express your ideas with our guest speaker. Now, floor is open to you, madam. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the great introduction of me. I'm happy to meet you all again, and I thank Rohan sir for giving me this opportunity once again. And maybe so we before getting into the main theme of the American scholar, it is very important to know on what basis Emerson, on what grounds Emerson put forth his arguments and all. Basically, we know that Emerson belongs to the school of transcendentalism. Okay. The name itself is something, you know, which is transcends. Always, you know, we associate this word to something divine. So, but it is, of course, has a religious tinge, but this transcendentalism mainly focus on what the nature gives to human being as a lesson, and in what way nature can be analyzed, or in what way the hidden lessons can be brought forth from nature. It's all about transcendentalism. And today, we are going to see the work called The American Scholar. Why it is especially American Scholar? Because especially when this work was written, there wasn't anything that is individualistic about American literature. So those were the beginning era where Americans were trying to contribute something unique, which they call themselves as their own. And such a thought emerged in the scholars of America by the influence of people like Emerson, because they were the people who were insisting the American writers to bring forth a new style, to bring about a new theme, to bring about what is America, to orient the outer world, what American life, what American literature, what Americanism is all about. And if you might ask, is there anything called Americanism? Because always America is identified with melting pot. What is a melting pot? Have you heard of this term? Have you heard of this term? Okay, right. So that means, you know, it is an amalgamation. It is a mixture of too many things. Because once, if you really see the history of America, America is a place where all those settlers came in to live along with their slaves. So all walks of life was very much in vogue at the same time when the land was formed. That you would find the filthy rich people at one hand and the other extreme, slavery. So in that way, it had all walks of life. So it had the utmost variety than any other land on earth. That's why, you know, this variety really brought about a new variety of writing. And they call it as Americanism. Okay, solely, purely American. Okay, first, then we shall get into the work. The work starts with Emerson addressing a society, which he calls it as, which people calls it as Phi Beta Kappa society. That means Phi means philosophy. There is a philosophical society, which is solely for literature. And Emerson was so enthralled to find the emerging trend of writing literature, where once it used to be only a place of science, a place of history. And he was happy that the society is bringing forth new writers, and first he greets them. And the occasion really gave him pleasure, because somehow he had the conviction that one day this idea of letters is what is going to become a binding force in America or among Americans. So he thought the time has come that people would produce literature, and that would be hailed throughout the world. That's why he starts his speech by stating that I'm not going to discuss history, I'm not going to discuss culture, I'm not going to discuss scientific inventions. We are here gathered to discuss about literature and how we can better our own literature, individual literature. That's how he starts his speech. Then he moves on to quote a fable, in which then he really wants to give few advices regarding how a scholar can be formed. And he even tried to orient people or try to inspire people to write something new, some kind of American literature especially. So he just first then he moves on to state a fable where he was discussing about the origin of species. Not the origin of a species of the scientists. It is how the world was created. First, he says that a man was created, then he was divided into, then the man was divided into men. That means too many people were produced, and that's how the society was formed. And when the crowd increased, the society got divided. And each one have been, every culture, every country would have the origin of a species of their own land. And this is his theory, where he states that when to facilitate this human kind, this human society, professions were created. And to facilitate the people, professions were created, but that is where things went wrong. Those professions really fissured the society so widely that everyone, forgetting that they belong to a cult, they belong to a group, they became individuals. That means Emerson wants to say that men become individual. According to Emerson, he wants to say that people become more selfish, where the intention of God while creating people was to help each other. But once this egoistic thing started developing in human beings, they failed to help each other. That's how men became individuals. That's how the profession which intended to facilitate humankind, mankind, became a dividing force. And that's how the class division happened. And eventually men forget the importance of being connected together as a society. Then he goes on to give a definition of what a scholar is according to him. He says that nature is a very important entity in teaching humankind the sublime, maybe my term, the sublimized lesson, the sublime lessons one could have. All the even the whatever inventions we have so far, those are all either inspired by nature or it would be a replica of nature. And Emerson says that nature is the best entity which teaches the sublime lesson. And if a person really understands the lesson which the nature taught, and he is a scholar, and if he is in the right path, and if he is in the correct mindset, he would become man thinking, or else he would become a mere thinker. That means if he really could grasp the lesson that is given out by nature, he becomes a scholar. Then he tells that there are three important things in a scholar's life which influences him. And the first important thing is nature. A scholar, a shrewd scholar, should know how to take lessons from nature. And he says that he should explore the everyday lessons which the nature intends to give him. And nothing could teach a better lesson than nature. And the scholar is, if the scholar is so observant, he'll understand the resemblance which he has with the nature. That is a circular motion. He, first thing is, if he is so observant enough, he would see the pattern in which, or pattern upon which a nature works. That means there isn't anything like beginning, middle, or end. He will find that pattern in himself too. A scholar can never have a beginning, a middle, or an end. It is a very gradual process where he cannot really identify when he has started to think and when he got influenced. Somehow it is a gradual process. Even at the end of this essay, he would say that all the childhood, a scholar, if he is a real scholar, the inspiration would start out of his experience since his childhood. So, and Emerson is so assertive that young minds try to, after knowing the pattern, these young scholars, or he calls, sometimes he calls an young scholar as a schoolboy. He would understand the underlying connections which things around him has. And in what way it is connected, if you ask, even a scholar would be able to identify it at the very earliest stage. And he quotes an example. A scholar would observe different trees, and eventually he'll come to know that all those a tree has a similar pattern underneath, that is its root. So in the same way, he also would know that each and every human being is connected. Because he is a progeny of a single man, like how all those tree has a root. We human beings also is a progeny of a root. That means, it has a single beginning. In that way, each and every human being is connected to each other, has the same spirit, and has a same forefather. And if a scholar comes to this understanding, then he would understand the very fact that he is not different from other human being. And though whatever class he belongs to, actually the class system is a human construct. In nature, they are all the same. So that is the kind of lesson which the nature gives him as an inspiration, or the nature gives him as a lesson. Then the second inspiration which a scholar gets is the influence of the past, especially in the form of books. Books allows the past scholars, the passed away scholars, to give their own experience. But you could find a kind of negative tone in Emerson when he mentions this idea of books, because he tells that he is not against reading books, but he is against imitation. Because his idea is to inspire people to give individual literature of their own land. But he is against the idea of these people, the emerging few of the emerging writers imitating the British as well as European literature. So he tells that the past experiences which is there in the book, it can be taken as an inspiration, but it shouldn't be a basement for his upcoming productive work, his upcoming work of art. That means even he can pick up the idea, but the construct should be entirely different. Even he says that after reading, a scholar should think, sit down and ponder, and whatever comes to his mind, whatever experience he gets as an individual, not influenced by the writer, he should give it in writing, and thus he could form something new. Time and again in the work, Emerson is of the idea that it can be taken as a rough idea, but it shouldn't be taken as a whole. And always a writer can be influenced by another writer, but that influence shouldn't upgrade itself to the level of imitation, to the level of hero worshipping. And that's what happens with Shakespeare, he says. Because Shakespeare is admired so much that it almost became a hero worship, and after which many writers after his period started writing something similar like Shakespeare. But Shakespeare is the original person, because all the others who came after him, they could produce only imitation work. That's why it was not as good as how Shakespeare has written it. And he says, Emerson is of the idea that such thing would happen if the work gets imitated. And he really wants to observe things around him and the lifestyle around him, and he wants the emerging writer to put down what he as an individual observes into his writing, not reading something else, not reading other literature and producing something similar to it, intending that maybe he would one day be as famous as the writer whom he has copied from. And there is a third influence, which he calls it as action. And action which he intends is, there are a few instances where he means that it is a writing and it is even speech. And a young scholar is known from the way he speaks. And Emerson is very much for the idea of the formation of such literary societies, because such literary societies would give him experience and wisdom. Because if a scholar participates in such a societal communion, he would find different people, different experiences, at times different languages, and altogether he will have a varied experience which would help him to create something new of his own. So he is of the idea, and he says that such formation of the society is a cornerstone in the formation of a good American literature. That means a literature which is of a great quality, which is of a different quality from the literature of rest of the world. And thus he says that he even says that it is enough of the muses of Europe, and it is the right time that you produce your own muses. And this is the time has come that a revolution is going to happen in literature, where writing literature would no longer viewed low in the society, where it is gaining popularity, is gaining importance, and it is going to become a powerful source in binding Americans together. So this is the crux of Emerson's maybe he has very broadly discussed, and this is Emerson's American scholar in a nutshell. All right. So there are few points which is so catchy about this literature, this work of art, where you could see Emerson stating that none of the work is perfect. That means when he, as I was mentioning, when he was referring about books, he denounces the idea of reading books because he states that none of them, first thing is, he states that none of them is perfect, and it is not devoid of conventional, local, and perishable. Any people guess what could Emerson mean by conventional, local, and perishable? Himaya, you want to ask something? Himaya? Somebody is raising hand. You want to give me an answer to the question I asked?
Yes, anyone?
Okay, I'll continue. Okay, conventional. Every society would have a folklore which gets transformed into something writing, an oral literature, which in meantime, when the writings developed, it would have come into existence in the form of writing. So they would have a conventional literary form like ballad, and the local, they would have a native culture, they would have a native lifestyle, which would get reflected, which would find its place in the literature of that particular place. Then perishable. Some literature, even you would find that in a movie, that is very much time bound. If after that time, if you read that particular writing, it may not make a better sense. At times, it would not make sense at all, because that literature would be time bound. All the connotations would be suiting to that particular political era of that country. So that may not make sense to someone who belongs to a different culture, and someone who belongs to a different political background, so political setup. So that's why he says that maybe one can copy the style. Maybe one can really admire the effort which the person has put forth in developing a literary work, but it is meant for that. Today we have literature which is which cannot be, or which at times may not be time bound, which which may not be culture bound also. But in those days, those literature are intended for their people. So getting inspired from or imitating such a literature would be very much inappropriate in producing an individual literature. That's why he very much denounces the idea that a literary work should be imitated. That's why throughout the work, he always stressed the point that the emerging writers should produce a literature which is of them, which is about them and their society, so that it would make sense. And in that way, he really encourages the writers to bring about new forms also. And one day, he in the end of his speech, he says that one day American literature is going to excel any other literature around the world. With that assurance, he closes his speech. All right. Another thing which I especially thought it is important to discuss is when he is discussing about the action, he very much discuss the development, the kind of gradual development which a writer should undergo. And as it is a speech, he seemed to have been questioned about why a writer should get influenced from the day-to-day life, for which he would have answered that the influence, it is very much important that a scholar should get his influence from his day-to-day life, because great scholars like Goldsmith, Burns, Copper, and currently his contemporaries, Wordsworth, Goethe, Carlyle, all of them could establish themselves as renowned writers because of their influence of their day-to-day life, because they had their influence from their day-to-day life. They are so observant of what is going around, and their registering of their day-to-day life, such things, such an aspect is the most important aspect which made them renowned writers. That's why he would justify his stance saying that being so observant and registering the happening of their day-to-day life as an individual would make a writer prove himself better, or who prove himself good, renowned. Okay, so it's a very large work. I could sum up the most important things I could say. So that's it.
So, my dear students, the floor is open for questions and clearing your doubts. Anjali? Madam, can you tell us something more on transcendentalists and transcendentalism as
Sir,
such?
yes, something always, the name itself is suggestive. Something transcends means something from the universe, it got down. That is something transcends. So there is something, so they believe in a divine, some divine force which exists in nature, and that gets manifest in all that is there in the nature. And that always, because it's a powerful entity, it gives the sublime lesson. And a true scholar could really, if he is shrewd enough, that's why he says that the person who gets inspired from the nature can be called as a scholar, according to Emerson. And he calls such a person a scholar. And that lesson, not every common man could understand. Only scholars could understand. So the sublime lessons which a nature gives is the most important lesson a man should imbibe. And that is that. So we got to learn from nature. That is the basic idea of transcendentalism. That's my perspective, personal perspective, and that's my idea of transcendentalism.
Thank you, ma'am.
And even while ending this particular work, he would say, there is always a divine inspiration which inspires me, and which has maybe made me reach people, made me renowned. And such an inspiration would also help men who aspire to become readers. That's how he finishes this work, his speech. So That is how he tries to mix up two different entity which are really poles apart, I would say, because at one thing he sounds a bit religious. At the same time, he brings out empirical things also. So in that way, he mix science as well as religion, and his idea of transcendentalism is both scientific as well as religious that way. And
Thank you.
Emerson's concept of transcendentalism is different from others, as per my understanding is concerned, because always he brings out something empirical, and he tries to justify things philosophical. He tries to justify scientific things with a philosophical explanation, which is two poles apart, because religion wants you to believe everything, whereas the science wants you to question everything. In that way, Emerson's transcendentalism is both scientific as well as religious.
Can I also add something to what you have added?
Yes, sir.
Uh,
Please.
he combines scientific and religious or philosophical inquiry. In a sense, scientific inquiry is more inductive. You go from particular to the universal, and the philosophical and the religious is more deductive. From the universal, you come to the particular. So he uses both these ways of understanding in order to arrive at a balance. So this is what I would like to add to what Professor Dr. Kalpana has been telling us. Yes, Krishanta.
Good evening, madam. Here, my question is, in the essay, our author used three terms. First one is scholar, and bookworm, and man thinking. Can you give me some more explanation about these three terms? Bookworm, scholar no need, bookworm, and man thinking.
Can I, sir,
Yes, ma'am.
can you rephrase this question, because I couldn't get it.
Now,
Actually,
there are
yeah, the audio, the volume is so low.
so low. Krishanta, can
What
you
was he
repeat?
asking?
Now, okay, sir?
Yeah, can you repeat again?
Okay, my question is about in the essay, in the speech, Emerson used three terms: bookworm and man think and scholar. There are three phrases. Can you explain, madam, a little bit of these three terms? And sometimes they are seems like contradict each other. That's why I asked.
He says that Emerson uses three terms in the essay. One is bookworm, the other one is scholar, and the last one, Krishanta, what is it?
Man thinking.
Man thinking.
Man thinking.
Not the thinking man, but man thinking.
Man thinking.
So he wants to know the difference between all these three.
In the I think in the second section of his speech, that is when he is referring about the influence of past on a scholar. He says that if if a man is a bookworm, he would just take the lessons as it is, and if that means he could reproduce what is given in the text, rather than he has individual thinking. And that is what Emerson accuses the present American scholars, saying that they take things as it is and they imitate and they produce something similar. So by bookworm, he means that just, eating as it is, taking it as it is, not having anything individualistic. And scholar, as he is a transcendentalist, he strongly believes that nature is capable, or nature could give whatever sort of lesson, it's there in the nature. And if you are a common man, you may not understand the lessons which nature wants to convey. And if you are a scholar, if you are a man with the necessary appetite, that is the necessary inquisitiveness, you would certainly very well understand the lessons which nature wants to convey. If you are able to understand the lessons which nature gives you, then you are a scholar. Otherwise, you are a common man. Because I think in the first section itself, he would be talking about sun rising and sunset, night, day, all those things. He would say that for a commoner, it's just, it's a daily event. And for a scholar, it is a lesson. It is an inspiration. And man thinking, he basically means that if you, the scholar and man thinking, both are same. That's my perspective. That means if you are in the right state, you would become man thinking. That means if you really understand the lessons of the nature, then you would become man thinking. That is the term he uses for a scholar. If he thinks in the right path, that means if he could understand the lessons of the nature.
Okay,
I
madam.
hope I have answered your question.
Yes, madam. Thank you very
Thank
much.
Prashantha
Yes, sir.
and my dear students, in addition to that man thinking, you also have the statue of the thinker by Rodin. Now, it's usually a man having his hand on his chin and is seated, leaning forward at the gates of hell. So this entire life, philosophically speaking, is almost between heaven and hell. And you have to be thinking, you have to be a thinker to choose the right one in each of your actions. So this has got a very big philosophical implication. The man thinking. So it is not, when Emerson is talking, he's not just talking about just one individual, but also as a collective form. So as a society, we need to think. We cannot say that the majority is always right. Majoritarianism can be always wrong, like in Sri Lanka. So even in democracy, sometimes numbers try to play the fool. But then just because it is a number game, it doesn't mean the majority is always right. So what Emerson tries to bring out is not just as an individual, but also as a society, we should be like the man thinking in the gates of hell. Because if you don't think, you will enter into hell. You alone will not just enter, but you will also make others to enter, even the future generations. Now look at what we are into. We are into war, we are into violence, we have created our lives as miserable as it can be. We fight in the name of peace. We carry guns and fire guns because we want peace. But how can peace be achieved through its opposite forces? So here this image of man thinking, or more similar to Rodin's statue of the thinker, is very essential and very philosophical and very thought-provoking.
And
How
I
answer?
want to add a point too.
Yeah, sure, ma'am.
While talking about the genesis of humans, Emerson would say that first a man was created and then men were created, and to facilitate them professions were made, and at one point he would say that men would become the thing they work with, and a scholar is not influenced by such a thing. A scholar is a real thinker. Whereas if you take the Emerson's concept of common men, he goes behind money. He goes behind material. And one day he becomes the material with which he works. He would even quote that, for example, if he is a sailor, he conditions himself, or he becomes something very similar to the rope which he uses. And though a scholar belongs to the same society, belongs to the same lifestyle also, he is devoid of such corruptions. He is devoid of such a style of life. Even we can say that.
Anjali? Senanjali, any questions? Himaya? No.
Maybe
Yes, sir. Ma'am,
this is a
can
very,
you
very
explain?
philosophical essay. Huh?
Ma'am,
Yes.
can
Yes,
you
Himaya.
explain? Are there any limitation to Emersonian dynamism?
Are there any limitations to
Emersonian dynamism, ma'am. Can you explain it a little bit?
Emersonian dynamism? There isn't any limitations as such, but always I don't especially find any limitations, but this Emersonian dynamism wants to change the way Americans had been thinking, because all those people who term themselves as motivational speakers, especially if you watch the videos of a few motivational speakers, the one thing what they do is, the first thing they want every individual to imbibe discipline, and that's what Emerson also wants the youth to imbibe. The first thing is discipline. Okay, he really want to, and always, this is what people say: if you really want to you achieve something unusual, you have to become someone unusual. You should do something which others haven't done, and this is the basic of every successful people. And Emerson, though these days, this kind of think different, all those phrases are there. In Emerson time, even in those days, he initiated such an idea, which nowadays, it's widely used. Do something different, innovation, all those things. This Emerson was speaking about in those days itself, in his time itself. And that's why there isn't any limitations in its dynamism. If you really take the lessons in the right sense, whatever he says is the all those atomic habits which these people are discussing now, he has discussed that even in those days. There is a book called 10 Atomic Habits. And one thing which he differs is all those people say that among the dynamic habits, one among the dynamic habit is reading habit. And even they don't clearly define what to read and what not to read, in what manner to read, in what to take from reading, what not to take. Simply they say that, one of the dynamic habit is reading regularly. But even Emerson defines it so clearly that you need to take what inspires you and leave alone what is not necessary. You needn't have to take each and everything. And by reading, you become an individual, like what you read from. So he is a far more advanced thinker than the thinkers of these days. That's why he could clearly filter, he could clearly define what to read and what to take from a reading. So there isn't any limitations. Actually, there are advanced things about the things which he advocates.
Thank you, madam.
Okay. Anyone else? It is very much necessary that, because if you are an individual, you should always be, something individualistic about you. The way you are walking shouldn't be a copy of somebody else. The way you talk shouldn't be an imitation of some other renowned person. Always, if you are an individual, you should have something unique about you, and that is the crux of Emerson's lesson too. He wants Americans to create something individual which they want to assert as American. Especially not in inventions and all, especially in literature he wants to bring about. Because literature is the lesson of life. If you really, because that's why I always tell my students that they should be so proud about taking literature as their subject, because all other subjects teach facts, but literature is the subject which teach life skill. That's why I always tell my students that they should be proud of taking literature. And that is what Emerson's idea, maybe mine would be maybe a little insignificant, but what he said is so dynamic that he was advocating everyone to produce something individualistic. And the people who attended those society, who were part of the society, they adhered to what he advised to. And now American literature, we have a different genre called American literature. And this stream of consciousness and many techniques which came from America. In that way, Emerson is as a harbinger of what America is today. Anybody else? Any other question?
Excuse me, madam.
Yes.
Madam, can you tell me that how it impact to the American intellectual culture at that time?
Hmm. Actually, there isn't any direct evidence that, after attending this, this author attended that speech and that author attended that speech. But there isn't any concrete evidence that these people followed, Emerson's advice. But the action itself, but the outcome after which the literary works which they produce are the evidence of what Emerson's once advocated the American people. After which, many techniques came from America only. For example, as I told you, the stream of consciousness technique, and even this concept of whodunit. Many American fictions are the pioneering fictions of pioneering works which brings forth the genre of detective fiction, and even the locked room mystery. There's a series of stories which in detective fictions which we call it as a locked room mystery. Those are all the brainchild of American people only. So there isn't any direct evidence, but there are chances that Emerson is a widely read scholar. So the outcome says that he is successful. But of course, no one is assertive that, no one has said out that, they followed Emerson, maybe as far as I know. But the outcome, the literary outcomes, the literary genres which were produced new are the results of what once Emerson dreamt of.
Thank you, madam.
Anybody?
Any more questions? So if we don't have questions, then Himaya.
Yes, sir. On behalf of all the participants, I extend our heartfelt gratitude for your insightful session on the American scholar and Emersonian dynamicity. Actually, ma'am, your expertise and passion for Emersonian work has truly enriched our understanding once again. We all appreciation of this powerful and influential speech. And thank you again for your dedication to fostering intellectual encouragement and for sharing your knowledge with us. Next, I must thank to Dr. Rohan Sawarimuthu, our senior lecturer, who encouraged us to conduct this session and his attempt to organize this enlightening evening for all. Finally, I thank to all the participants for allocating this time for us. Thank you very much all. Thank you.
So thank you, Professor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for this great opportunity that I could meet your children once again. Okay, thank you.
Really nice of you. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Thank you.